Please note that the characters and events depicted in this podcast are fictional. Also, Wolters Kluwer Health issues the following disclaimer. The only purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform and does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. This podcast is available for private, non-commercial use only. By accessing this podcast, you acknowledge that it is the property of Wolters Kluwer Health. Wolters Kluwer Health and its affiliates assume no liability for any use of this podcast.
Hello, this is Nurse Flo Knight, and welcome to Finger on the Pulse, the show nurses tune into for information about current issues and trends in nursing. Today's segment is called Nursing Without Borders. We are going to address the topic many of you may come across in your nursing careers. That is, what do you do if you have an opportunity to practice in another state? Maybe your spouse is going to be transferred. Maybe you find an irresistible opportunity for that dream nursing position in another state. Or maybe you just want to be a travel nurse and see the U.S. while practicing your profession. So if you find yourself in one of these situations, what guidelines for practice do you need to follow? What are your responsibilities? We will be asking listeners questions and asking you to text in your responses. Then our guest nurse educator, Dr. Macy King, an expert in nursing law, will provide answers and explanations to those questions. As a legal nurse consultant for more than 30 years, Dr. King has consulted on many legal cases involving nurses who were in depositions or litigation. Welcome, Dr. King.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, listeners, please respond to this statement. The Nurse Practice Act is the same in all states. Now, text in your answer by texting us at Pulse 78573. Enter 1 for yes and 2 for no. Okay, here come the results. 55% of you think yes. Dr. King, is that the correct answer?
Actually, the answer is no. All states have enacted a Nurse Practice Act, or NPA, but the specifics of NPAs vary among states. State boards of nursing can clarify or make the Nurse Practice Act of that state more specific as needed. And these boards are all a part of the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, or NCSBN. To protect the public, besides the NPA for each state, all nurses are governed by the Nursing Code of Ethics.
So, each state has its own NPA, and it's up to nurses in that state to be familiar with it.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. King. Okay, our next statement is as follows. If a nurse wishes to practice in a particular state, he or she should first check with the State Board of Nursing to see if there is reciprocity between the two states. Reciprocity means nurses can practice under one license in more than one state. Listeners, now is the time to text in your answer. Text us at Pulse 78573. Enter 1 for yes and 2 for no. Here come our results. 75% of you think yes. Dr. King, what's your opinion?
The statement is correct. If a nurse wants to practice in a particular state, he or she should first see if there's reciprocity between that state and the state he or she currently resides in. Now, this can be done by checking with the State Board of Nursing. Many states do offer reciprocity.
Dr. King, isn't there also something called compact states? Can you give the listeners a brief description of what that is?
Oh, sure, of course. As of January 19th, 2018, the Enhanced Nurse Licensure Compact, or ENLC, has been implemented, which replaces the original Nurse Licensure Compact, or NLC. A nurse with a permanent residency in an ENLC state is eligible to work in other states that are in the ENLC. Now, there are currently a few dozen states in the ENLC, and more will likely be added over time.
Oh, thank you for your insight on this, Dr. King. Before we conclude, can you give us a scenario when you've had to reach out to the Board of Nursing or have given advice to a nurse regarding his or her practice and licensing responsibilities?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I once had to consult on a home health case. The RN was a private duty nurse and cared for an elderly member of a family in New York. The family had planned a summer vacation to the Jersey Shore, and they asked the nurse to come along and continue her responsibilities to the patient. The nurse agreed, but then was concerned because she wasn't licensed to practice in New Jersey, so she wasn't sure if this would be in violation of the Nurse Practice Act. So I advised her to contact the Board of Nursing in the state of practice to review the regulations. She reached out to the Board of Nursing to clarify. She found out that in New Jersey, there's an extended period of time, or grace period, granted for practicing, so she was able to continue in her role for the duration of the vacation.
Wow, that's very interesting. Oh, this topic is something we don't always remember to consider, isn't it?
Yes, now when in doubt, check it out.
Yes, thank you, Dr. King, for providing this important information to our listeners and this reminder. In our next segment, 5 tips for new job survival, you can call in for advice. Until then, this is Nurse Night giving report. Remember to always keep your finger on the pulse.